The founding of Kievan Rus, c. 882. The establishment of Kievan Rus marks the beginning of Russia's history. This federation of East Slavic tribes, led by Prince Oleg, laid the foundation for the Russian state. Centered around the city of Kiev, Kievan Rus was a significant political and cultural entity in Eastern Europe. It facilitated trade routes between Scandinavia, Byzantium, and the East, contributing to its economic prosperity. The adoption of Christianity in 988 under Grand Prince Vladimir I connected Kievan Rus with the Byzantine Empire and introduced Orthodox Christianity to the region, shaping its religious and cultural identity. Christianization of Kievan Rus, 988. Grand Prince Vladimir I's conversion to Christianity in 988 was a pivotal moment in Russian history. It marked the beginning of Orthodox Christianity's influence in the region and established a lasting religious and cultural connection with the Byzantine Empire. The spread of Christianity contributed to the consolidation of a unified Rus identity and provided a basis for the development of Russian culture and civilization. The church became a central institution in Kievan Rus, wielding significant influence over politics, society, and culture. The Mongol invasion, 13th century. The Mongol invasion of the 13th century, led by Batu Khan, had a profound impact on Russia. The Mongol-Tatar yoke subjected the Russian principalities to Mongol rule for over 2 centuries, profoundly influencing the country's development. While the invasion brought devastation and suffering, it also facilitated cultural exchange and economic development. The Mongol rule decentralized power, allowing the Russian princes a degree of autonomy in exchange for tribute. It also stimulated the growth of trade networks and urban centers, contributing to the rise of Moscow as a dominant power. The rise of Moscow, 14th to 15th century. Moscow emerged as a significant political and cultural center during the 14th and 15th centuries, gradually eclipsing Kiev's influence. Figures like Ivan III, known as Ivan the Great, expanded Moscow's territory, consolidated power, and challenged the Mongol domination. Ivan III's marriage to Sophia Paleologina, the niece of the last Byzantine emperor, symbolized Moscow's claim to be the successor of the Byzantine Empire and the Third Rome. Moscow's growing power laid the groundwork for the future Russian state and its imperial ambitions. The reign of Ivan the Terrible, 1547 to 1584. Ivan IV, commonly known as Ivan the Terrible, became the first Tsar of Russia in 1547, marking the beginning of the Tsarist autocracy. Ivan's reign was characterized by centralization of power, expansion of territory, and repression. His conquests, including the annexation of Kazan and Astrakhan, expanded Russia's territory to the Volga River and consolidated its control over the Russian heartland. However, Ivan's rule was also marked by brutality, including the infamous Oprichnina, a state policy of terror and persecution targeting perceived enemies of the Tsar. The Time of Troubles, 1598 to 1613. The Time of Troubles was a period of political turmoil and social upheaval in Russia following the death of Ivan the Terrible's last heir in 1598. It was characterized by dynastic disputes, foreign intervention, famine, and social unrest. The Polish-Lithuanian intervention, in particular, threatened Russian sovereignty and sparked patriotic resistance. The election of Michael Romanov as Tsar in 1613 marked the end of the Time of Troubles and the beginning of the Romanov dynasty, which would rule Russia for over 3 centuries. The reign of Peter the Great, 1682 to 1725. Peter I, or Peter the Great, ascended to the throne in 1682 and embarked on a series of ambitious reforms aimed at modernizing Russia and transforming it into a European power. Inspired by his grand embassy to Western Europe, Peter implemented sweeping changes across all aspects of Russian society. His reforms included the establishment of a navy, the introduction of Western-style education and administrative structures, and the founding of St. Petersburg as a new capital. Peter's reign marked a decisive break with Russia's medieval past and laid the foundation for its future as a European power. The Great Northern War, 1700 to 1721. The Great Northern War was a conflict between Russia and Sweden for control of the Baltic Sea region. Initiated by Peter the Great in 1700, the war aimed to secure access to the Baltic and establish Russia as a major European power. Despite initial setbacks, Russia emerged victorious after defeating the Swedish forces at the Battle of Poltava in 1709. The Treaty of Nystad in 1721 confirmed Russia's dominance in the Baltic and marked the beginning of its emergence as a European great power. The expansion of the Russian Empire, 18th century. The 18th century saw the expansion of the Russian Empire across Eurasia under the Romanov dynasty. Through a combination of conquest, diplomacy, and colonization, Russia expanded its territory into Siberia, Central Asia, and the Caucasus. Figures like Catherine the Great further consolidated Russia's control over these vast territories, promoting colonization, modernization, and cultural assimilation. The Russian Empire became one of the largest and most ethnically diverse empires in history, encompassing a vast array of peoples, cultures, and landscapes. The Decembrist Revolt, 1825. The Decembrist Revolt of 1825 was a seminal event in Russia's history, reflecting growing discontent with the autocratic rule of Tsar Nicholas I and the desire for political reform. The revolt, led by a group of liberal-minded military officers, called for constitutional government, the rule of law, and social justice. Although the revolt was swiftly suppressed, it marked the beginning of organized opposition to Tsarist autocracy and laid the groundwork for future revolutionary movements in Russia. The emancipation of the serfs, 1861. Tsar Alexander II's emancipation of the serfs in 1861 was a watershed moment in Russian history. The decree abolished the feudal system of serfdom, granting millions of peasants personal freedom and limited land rights. The emancipation aimed to modernize the economy, alleviate social tensions, and consolidate the loyalty of the peasantry to the Tsarist regime. However, the reform fell short of fulfilling the peasants' aspirations for true economic and social equality, leading to continued discontent and revolutionary agitation. The Russo-Japanese War, 1904–1905. The Russo-Japanese War of 1904–1905 was a conflict between Russia and Japan over territorial and strategic interests in East Asia. The war exposed the weaknesses of the Tsarist regime and the inefficiencies of the Russian military, leading to a series of defeats and humiliations for Russia. The Battle of Tsushima in 1905, in which the Russian Baltic Fleet was decisively defeated by the Japanese Navy, highlighted the urgent need for political and military reform in Russia. The war also fueled discontent at home, contributing to the Revolution of 1905. The Russian Revolution of 1917. The Russian Revolution of 1917 was a series of revolutionary upheavals that led to the overthrow of the Tsarist autocracy and the establishment of a Bolshevik-led government under Vladimir Lenin. The February Revolution, sparked by widespread discontent and economic hardship, forced Tsar Nicholas II to abdicate and brought an end to centuries of Romanov rule. The October Revolution, led by Lenin and the Bolsheviks, seized power from the provisional government and proclaimed the establishment of a socialist state. The revolution unleashed a wave of radical social, political, and economic transformations that would reshape Russia and the world. The Russian Civil War, 1917–1922. The Russian Civil War was a protracted conflict fought between the Bolsheviks, who sought to consolidate their power and establish socialism, and a diverse array of anti-Bolshevik forces, including monarchists, liberals, nationalists, and foreign interventionists. The Civil War ravaged Russia, resulting in millions of casualties, widespread destruction, and economic collapse. The Red Army, under the leadership of Lenin and Leon Trotsky, emerged victorious in 1922, cementing Bolshevik control over Russia and establishing the Soviet Union. The formation of the Soviet Union, 1922. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, was established in 1922, consolidating power under the Bolsheviks and uniting the diverse territories of the former Russian Empire into a single socialist state. The Soviet Union comprised multiple republics, including Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and others, each with its own distinct national identity and cultural heritage. The USSR pursued a policy of socialist construction, industrialization, and collectivization, aiming to build a utopian society based on Marxist-Leninist principles. The Great Patriotic War, 1941–1945. World War II, known as the Great Patriotic War in Russia, was a titanic struggle between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, fought on the Eastern Front. The Soviet Union bore the brunt of the conflict, suffering immense human and material losses in its fight against the Axis powers. The Battle of Stalingrad, a turning point in the war, saw the Red Army defeat the German forces in a grueling urban battle, marking the beginning of the Soviet advance towards victory. The Soviet victory in World War II came at an immense cost, but solidified its status as a global superpower. The Cold War, 1947 to 1991. The Cold War was a period of geopolitical tension and ideological rivalry between the United States and its allies and the Soviet Union and its satellite states. Characterized by ideological competition, nuclear brinkmanship, and proxy conflicts, the Cold War shaped global politics for much of the 20th century. The division of Europe into Eastern and Western blocs, the arms race, and the space race were defining features of the Cold War era. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, highlighting the dangers of superpower confrontation. The dissolution of the Soviet Union, 1991. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked the end of the Cold War era and the collapse of one of the world's largest socialist states. A combination of internal and external factors, including economic stagnation, political unrest, nationalist movements, and the reforms initiated by Mikhail Gorbachev, led to the disintegration of the Soviet Union into independent republics. The declaration of independence by the Baltic states, followed by the failed coup attempt in August 1991 and the signing of the Belavisa Accords in December 1991, sealed the fate of the Soviet Union and heralded a new era in Russian history. The presidency of Vladimir Putin, 2000. President Vladimir Putin's presidency, which began in 2000, has been characterized by a consolidation of power, assertive foreign policy, and economic reforms. Putin's presidency followed the tumultuous years of Boris Yeltsin's rule, marked by economic turmoil, political instability, and social unrest. Putin's early years in office were marked by stability and economic growth, fueled by rising oil prices and a wave of market reforms. However, his presidency has also been marred by accusations of authoritarianism, suppression of political dissent, and violations of human rights. Putin's assertive foreign policy, including the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and military intervention in Syria, has raised tensions with the West and reshaped Russia's geopolitical position on the world stage. Annexation of Crimea and conflict in Ukraine, 2014-present. The annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014 and the ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine have been defining moments in recent Russian history, signaling a shift towards a more assertive and confrontational foreign policy. The annexation of Crimea, following a controversial referendum, sparked international condemnation and led to a deterioration of relations between Russia and the West. The conflict in eastern Ukraine, fueled by ethnic tensions, geopolitical rivalries, and competing nationalisms, has resulted in thousands of deaths and a humanitarian crisis. The conflict remains unresolved, contributing to ongoing tensions between Russia and the West and shaping the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe.